Okay, welcome, and thank you all for coming. Welcome to our in-person guests and everyone who joined live stream. We have no idea how many people are on live stream, so I just find that interesting, not knowing if you're talking to 10 people or 1,000 or whatever. So we'll just assume 1,000 and see how it goes. And what we're going to do is we're just going to dive right in. So how many of you think that some people might be more mature than others? Show of hands. Okay, so a couple laughs. And so, this tells us that we're already sort of naturally inclined to know that there's this thing called maturity, and that we can already sort of judge that some behavior might be a little better than others, or perhaps coming from a more enlightened perspective. And so if I was to ask you what are some examples of characteristics of these more mature people, what would you say, sort of just based on your own experience, from people you know, maybe a leader who inspired you or something like that? We'll hear from a couple people. And we don't have a mic to pass around, so I'll just repeat whatever you say. Ease. What was that?
Ease. So the ease that they can do things.
Okay, ease. Okay, so they feel comfortable. Maybe in their own skin, in the situation that they're in, yeah, for sure. So they would have sort of had to be around for a while to have ease, and they would have had to sort of earn a position in the group that they're in. So that's a great example. What else?
Relaxation. Some sort of relaxation.
Relaxation, yeah, great. Yeah, and I think that's similar to the ease one, and that's good. Any other thoughts? Aitor?
Maybe questioning yourself and questioning your surroundings.
Okay, questioning yourself and questioning your surroundings. Absolutely. And so that's sort of a capacity that comes on later for us in our development. And so we're going to talk about that in a second.
Authenticity.
Authenticity, yeah. Absolutely. We're going to definitely, that's the central theme of maturity. Good. So what we're going to do is, if we go to the next screen, excellent. So what we have on the screen is 7 different ways in which a Scrum Master might perceive feedback. And we're going to do a little bit of an activity to ground this idea of what we mean by maturity and how it might impact our role in an agile function. And so what we'd like you to do is just take 3 minutes and just do the best you can and just rank each one of these responses from least mature to most mature, just based on your experience. Number 1 will be the least mature, and number 7 will be the most mature. So we'll give you just a couple minutes for that.
Come on in. There's a couple spots here and some of the tables. Whoops. It's always scary when you come into a completely silent room, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We're just doing a quick table activity, so come in and find a spot.
Actually, everyone was talking about you, and they stopped when you came in. Yeah, so what we're doing is we're just ranking each one of these sentences here, just based on personal experience, what might be least mature to most mature. So we probably have about 60 seconds left for you. How are you all doing? If you're done, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. So we'll give you another 30 seconds or so. Okay, so let's call that good enough for now. I saw some scrunchy faces in there, so good. Maybe there's wondering about a few things. So let's take a look at the answer key, and let's see how you did. So did anybody have two that were switched? Couple? Which ones did you have switched? A and F. Okay, great. And yeah, so those two are close. So let's, when we get there, just watch for, we're going to sort of talk through each one of those, but just watch how A feeds into F and how you actually can't have F before you have A. And we'll talk about that in a second. What else? Over here?
G and E, although I have to say I took a long time to read everything, so maybe I just didn't.
Sure, yeah, and we ask you to do it very quickly. Yeah, and so those ones are also pretty close. Okay, great. Yeah, well, one more?
Yeah, I have F instead of B.
F instead of B.
I think it's
Okay.
even more mature if you don't have this over-idealistic approach to life.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? So those ones are two stages apart. But what's interesting is people, as humans, we're not one of these or the other. Oftentimes we're a mix of several of them. And so if we have a leader that's particularly inspiring in our life that maybe knows how to leverage an earlier stage really effectively, but they still have a center of gravity that's maybe a little later, that might also contribute to some of the confusion. But let's take a look at each one of the sentences in a little bit more detail in order of increasing maturity. So at this first stage here, even before we're socialized and we begin to learn how to function in society, our basic instinct is going to be to self-protect and to survive. And so when you give me feedback, I'm gonna sort of view it as an attack and as a threat and as something that needs to be eliminated, because the stance when I'm coming from this perspective is it's a jungle out there and it's either kill or be killed. But at this next stage, we eventually realize that life is actually more than just surviving. We actually need to learn to live in society and learn to follow the rules. And so we do just that. We learn to pay our taxes and have a job and raise a family and be a good parent and a good employee and these types of things. And so it becomes very important for us now to be included and to be viewed as an upstanding member in our society. And so at this point, when I'm coming from this perspective, if you give me feedback, I'm actually going to view it and experience it as disapproval, because I really want to fit in and I want to do as I'm expected in my role. And so at this stage, we don't yet have a sense of separate psychological self, because our identity is actually coming from the group that we're belonging to, whether that's our society or our team or our Scrum people or whatever it is. And so when you're criticizing my group at this stage of maturity, you're actually criticizing me as an individual. There is no difference. And so going on to this next stage here, we're actually going to separate ourselves from our group, and our identity now comes from what we do and doing what we do better. And so this is a move that we call the birth of the psychological self, because my identity is coming from whatever craft I take on. And so I want to be the best Scrum Master or the best Agile coach or the best dad or the best engineer or whatever it is. And so when I'm coming from this perspective, if you criticize my work that I do, now you're actually criticizing me. There is no difference. And so I'm actually not just looking to fit in anymore with the group. I have a position. It's been hard-earned. I've been around for a while. I know what's what, and I deserve to be here. So in order for me to listen, now you have to earn my respect. And so that's why I'm going to be more interested in listening to feedback, or willing to listen to feedback, if it's coming from an expert in my field, and especially in that craft that I sort of take on. And so moving forward to this next one here, and so now my identity is no longer coming from what I do. I now see myself as an independent human being who makes choices. And so I'm all about setting goals, improving myself, changing the world, and creating the life that I want independently. And so when you give me feedback, this is actually the first time that I'm going to be able to say, you know what? Actually, you're right. Maybe I could have done that differently, especially if it's something that's going to help me to improve and to achieve those goals that I have for myself. And so this one is considered an advanced stage and a very powerful one, because people at this stage of maturity are generally responsible for most of the progress in our society, because they're actively shaping it, they're actively setting visions and making those visions come to reality, and they're sort of movers and shakers, and they can make things happen. This stage is also sort of the fullest expression of what our society would expect from sort of a fully matured adult. But there's more, of course. And so moving forward, at this point, we realize that there are actually many different parts of me that I can't see. And how I got here is as a result of my conditioning. And so this goes back to this concept that Aitor brought up about questioning myself and taking a look in the mirror a lot more. And so, I see now that I think this way, and I am who I am because I was raised in a certain way by certain parents in a certain environment, and these were the conditions. But what's really interesting when I realized that is, well, Brock, he was raised but in a different set of circumstances with a different environment. And so that's why he thinks the way he thinks. And so when there's an issue between us, who am I now to say that my way of thinking about something is right? And so this is a huge leap in maturity where I realized that there's no absolute truths out there anymore. Truth is relative. We're both coming from different contexts, and so we're both entitled to our interpretations, and so we're both going to be right. And so now when you give me feedback, I'm going to actually be really interested in welcoming all these different perspectives and these different right opinions, because I didn't know they existed before. And I'm especially interested when you tell me something about myself that I didn't even know I did. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Is that really me? Because I can use that now because I'm no longer fixed about who I am and the choices that I've made in the past. Okay, and so at this next stage, this is where systems thinking really comes online for us. And we start to be able to appreciate the nature of the self interacting with the system. And so when something goes wrong or whatever, I can't actually blame something outside myself anymore because it's a system. And I'm a part of that. And so I would have actually contributed that in some way too. And I'm also really interested in my internal systems now as well as my external systems. And so when you talk to me, I'm actually looking to learn something about myself just by the way that we interact. And so when I talk to Aitor, he says one thing, and then when I talk to Brock, he gives me a different response. And that actually tells me something about me, not just something about you. And so I start to also appreciate that the nature of conflict is a little bit different, where it's really just this natural part of any viable relationship. And so I'm no longer actually just welcoming feedback at this point. I'm actually actively inviting it in because I recognize now that without it, I'm not going to be able to grow. I have real blind spots that I can't see, and I need that feedback. And not just growing, but I'm specifically at this point really interested in this idea of self-actualization and achieving my purpose in life, whatever that happens to be for me. And so this last one that we're going to be talking about today we realized that feedback is really just a natural and a necessary part of all living systems. And so when you criticize me, I actually now don't even see it as fundamentally different from praise. And so it's not even a thing that I have to deal with anymore. And also when you give me feedback, yes, it tells me a little bit about you, it tells me a little bit about me, but now it also tells me a little bit about the system, and it's all of it and it's none of it. And there's this just radical acceptance and compassion for all of us, because we're really just all sort of floating in the same boat that is our universal human experience. And so usually when we do this exercise, especially really quick, we'll have a couple that are flipped or whatever. But can you see now, for those ones that you may have had flipped, how one might come after another, and how you might have to first experience the experience that's a little earlier before you can sort of have the one that's a little bit later. Is that progression landing? Great. Okay, so before we go too far then, we'll take a moment to introduce the talk and introduce ourselves. So welcome again to everyone. This is Brock Argue, and I'm Erkan Kadir. Brock is said to have the best last name for a leadership maturity coach. Yeah, what stage is that coming from? So, had fun ancestors. So we're both certified enterprise coaches and certified team coaches through Scrum Alliance. We consider ourselves agile coaches, relationship systems coaches, and vertical development coaches. And it's that vertical development part that's really influencing the talk here today. Because at each one of those stages, there actually comes online a completely different value system for us. We take on different values as we grow. And agility, at its core, is really just a value system. And so you can start to appreciate how there's a really strong correlation here, and how this can be a really powerful lens to look not just through for ourselves as Scrum Masters and coaches, but when we're helping an organization with adoption or whatever their goals might happen to be. So our company is Superheroes Academy, and we're based out of Calgary, Canada. We're available globally for agile transformation team coaching, and we offer now all Scrum Master and Product Owner certifications through online programs. So that's just our intro.
Okay. And so here's what you can expect to take with you when you walk out of the session today. An awareness of the developmental stages of maturity for adults, a self-assessment that you can use to gauge your current level of maturity, and your developmental experiment designed by you that you can run when you get back together with your teams after the conference. And so there's a key distinction that we want to make sure everyone understands that's central when we're thinking of this idea of adult maturity. And that is the difference between horizontal development and vertical development. And so horizontal development occurs when we learn new information, new knowledge, new skills. But even as we're learning those things, we may not change our assumptions about ourselves or about others or how the world works. And so our self-awareness can remain unchanged even as we're engaging in horizontal development. Vertical development, on the other hand, occurs over time as we notice marked shifts in our basic assumptions about ourselves, about others, and about the world. This indicates that adults continue to grow and that there's an identifiable and measurable stages that adults progress through in a predictable order. Our life experiences tell us, our life experiences teach us that we need to challenge notions of what is happening. Okay? And so, as an example, let's talk about parenting. And so, when you have your first baby, you have some ideas of what kind of parent you're going to be, and you know what this whole parenting thing is all about anyway. And then you fast forward 8 years, and you realize you actually knew nothing about what parenting is, but now you really do know what parenting is all about. And so this is a transformational shift in your perspective about parenting. And then if you were to fast forward again to when your child is an adult, you realize you have no idea what it takes to parent an adult child. And so, this leads to a shift in our mental models, as well as taking on a new perspective about parenting. Whoops, too much. Okay. And so, when enough of these shifts of perspective happen in your life, you realize that you've landed in a new place with a new way of looking at the world where the old assumptions that you had don't really hold true anymore. This is what vertical development is all about, and it's becoming more and more important in the realm of leadership development. Vertical development is based on empirically validated research that's been conducted over the last 50 years into how adults learn and grow and develop. And so another way to think about it is thinking about altitude. And sometimes we refer to vertical development as altitude. Okay? And so the higher the altitude, the greater the perspective. And so if you take an example or the metaphor of climbing a mountain, the higher you climb, the further you can see. When you're at the base of the mountain, all you can see is what's right in front of you. And so in terms of perspective, vertical development is about the altitude of the perspective. And so you'll notice on here, this is kind of the framework that Erkan was taking us through specifically about feedback. And so this is the arc of development. There's 4 stages on the left of the midpoint and 4 stages on the right. And you'll also notice that about 80 to 85% of the general population comes from a conventional perspective. Society supports people up to stage 4, self-determining. And Erkan had mentioned that a bit earlier. We are still in some ways at this stage doing what society wants us to do. Crossing the midpoint means questioning, how society has programmed us or how we've been conditioned by society. And we start to ask questions like, well, who am I really? And so a question I'll just throw out to all of you. What do you think the reason is that it's an arc and it goes up and then back down? Any guesses as to that, what that might be? Okay, eventually go full circle?
Obviously with different
Okay.
different metrics, because eventually what we're doing now, from 20 to 30 years, maybe it's already outdated and there's already a new framework. That's why I was thinking, okay, maybe it goes then up and then down, because when as time passes and you achieve a certain level, then you're not there anymore, and you need to continuously keep innovating. This is, again,
Yeah.
it's a full circle that we keep doing over and over, where we innovate and then we reach the maximum level, let's call it, of maturity, and then we keep changing. But where do we look at?
Okay.
Again, we need to start looking again from the beginning, changing everything, change our perspective, think of different ways, and that new different ways will lead now to the old way of thinking. What we were thinking, where we were, it's no longer updated, and we need to keep updated ourselves. And then again, let's start from the beginning.
Okay. Okay, yeah. And so it is in the circle. But I really do like what you said about as you progress to another stage, you're not there anymore at maybe an earlier stage. You still have the capacity of the earlier stage because you don't forget how to do those things, but you definitely do progress through. Yeah, other ideas?
Because you mentioned that you're sort of like in the society with the focus at the beginning, and you talk about yourself as well, but then thinking about I feel like you kind of go up there, you start questioning yourself, go on that journey, and then you come back to the group what you learn as well.
Okay, okay. And so, okay, one more, yep.
Maybe it's also the focus that you said. You are not always the hero or the saint who is unitive. Yeah? You are not always the self-centered person. You have all those abilities in you, and depending on your life, you cannot be this all the time. So maybe that's why it goes down again, because it will only be sometimes that you keep your transcendent approach to life.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so we achieve, let's say, a later a stage, and we do still have the capacity as an earlier stage. And so this is based on ego development theory, and the ego makes meaning and creates identities, okay? And so, as you're on your way up the arc, the ego is becoming somebody, it's creating an identity, all right? Up until you reach stage 4, self-determining. And then what happens is, on the way down, on the right side of the arc, the ego starts to question, well, who am I really, and what is this all about? And it starts to deconstruct the identity that was created. And so that's where we start questioning, the ways that we're showing up and things like that. And so as the ego is deconstructing its identity, you might wake up one day and realize you're asking yourself questions like, why am I still in the rat race? Or why am I climbing this ladder? Or is this what I really want in life? And so at that point, you start to notice that the identity you've created is no longer serving you. And you start to question the choices that you've made in life. So the boundaries that you created on the way up the arc were useful in getting a sense of separateness in the conventional stages. And then you start to notice in the post-conventional stages that those boundaries begin to dissolve until you reach the last stage that we're showing here, where they disappear entirely. And then this is where you realize that, well, now there's no difference between me and another person. We're having the same experiences, just in different bodies. And so at later stages, what happens is we also take on an expanded view of who we are on this planet. So we're going to go deeper. This is a bit of the theory and stuff that we've been talking about with you. We're going to go deeper into this. And just before we do dive into the implications of leadership maturity for Scrum Masters, there's a couple of ethical considerations that we're asking you to hold as we go into our activity today. And so this session is not about saying that good Scrum Masters are at this stage and great Scrum Masters are at this stage, okay? Context matters. Later isn't necessarily better. So if you think of a group in the middle of an emergency, the consensus decision-making of someone at stage 4 or 5 self-questioning isn't helpful. The group needs the quick decision-making from a self-centric perspective. We also don't stage other people, okay? So leveraging the tools that we offer you here today to better understand yourself and your developmental opportunities is the purpose. Please don't leverage these tools to put someone else in a box at one of these stages. Okay, so good? Yes? All right, thank you. And so what we're going to do, and there's handouts in front of you where you'll see these on there, but we're going to explore the 5 Scrum Master accountabilities from the Scrum Guide. So not all of them, but we're going to look at 5 of them. And we're referring to these as accountabilities, but also as developmental lines, okay? And so each page of the handout is one developmental line, so there's 5 of them there. And what we're going to do is we're going to go deep into the first one together, and then we're going to allow some time for you to explore individually and in your groups some of the other ones. And as we go forward, really looking forward to, well, what's something that you want to work on in terms of your developmental experience. So to start with, what does ensuring that all Scrum events take place and are positive, productive, and kept within the time box look like through the lens of vertical development?
Okay, so starting from the earliest stage, 2-3 self-centric here, a Scrum Master at that stage might say, do the event my way, or I'm going to withdraw completely. It's my way or the highway.
Okay, so you'll notice here at the self-centric stage, it's all about self-interest and self-protection. Scrum Masters at this stage are quick to act. They're good working with short-term outcomes. They like to win, and they tend to focus on concrete actions or things. And so the reason we call this self-centric is because when we act, the goal is to get my way. So a mantra at this stage might be, it sucks to suck.
Okay, so let's look at the next one here. The group Scrum Master might say to themselves, Scrum events are important, but keeping the team happy is more important. That's why I bring donuts and agreed to keep the Scrum events as short as possible.
We should have brought donuts.
I know,
Or
right?
pastille. Yes. So you'll notice at the group-centric stage, it's all about getting along and fitting in, and fitting into the group specifically. Scrum Masters at this stage spend an unusually large amount of value on keeping the team happy, even at the expense of their own well-being. Group-centric Scrum Masters are likely to defer decision-making to those within the group who have greater authority than themselves. And they may get upset with those who don't go along with the status quo, such as not following the Scrum guide or the Scrum framework to the letter, or failing to abide by team norms. And so a mantra at this stage might be all for one and one for all.
Okay, so if we look at number 3-4 there, a skill-centric Scrum Master might decide that the way that the organization has defined the backlog refinement process doesn't make sense for our team. So I'm going to do it differently, starting by time boxing the discussion on each user story as a way to stay focused and get more done during the meeting. I go home feeling great when the meetings I run are successful.
So you'll notice at the skill-centric stage, it's all about how well I execute my role, in this case, that of a Scrum Master. This Scrum Master in particular has a narrow focus and views himself as successful when the meetings that he leads are facilitated well, whether or not those meetings have any useful outcome and whether or not the team is successful. And so a mantra at this stage might be, if something can't be done right, it's not worth doing at all.
Okay, so let's move on to the self-determining stage. Here, a Scrum Master with this view, they might view their role this way. So I have time to focus on removing organizational impediments since I've trained others to run Scrum events. They don't facilitate the events exactly as I would, but I trust my team to get it done, and effecting change on a larger scale leads to my career success.
And so you'll notice at the self-determining stage, it's all about effectiveness and increasing one's impact. One of the main ways that stage 4s do this is by casting a wider net and working through others. Scrum Masters at this stage are more flexible because they care more about results than about following the actual process to the letter. They are very effective at helping their team set goals, continuously improve, and they love running experiments and assessing results. And so a mantra at this stage might be good to great.
Okay, so a self-questioning Scrum Master, they might actually feel grossed out when they think about how these events are really just pushing them to constantly deliver more and more and more. More for what, they might ask. They might say, I'm not super motivated by my company's goal of 20% year-over-year growth and the role that these meetings play in achieving that goal.
And so as you can see, this Scrum Master is unhappy with the idea of growth for growth's sake and begins to question, what's the point of all this? Their discontent stems from the goals that their team is pursuing being based on today's society's external definition of success, which is more money, bigger company, growth for growth's sake, all of which are unlikely to bring real happiness. Through this perspective, this Scrum Master is questioning the fundamental beliefs that have brought them to this place. And so a mantra at this stage might be, know thyself.
Okay, so number 5 there, self-actualizing Scrum Master would view their role as keeping our team focused on the why is how I add value. Why not just for us, but also for the impact that we're having on the community, our environment, and future generations. The consensus-driven decision-making of the last stage really frustrates me because it's slow and all opinions are not always equal.
And so you'll notice at the self-actualizing stage, it's all about altitude and the greater perspective that can be seen from their worldview. Scrum Masters at this stage see problems as systemic manifestations that can only be understood in the larger context. They actively seek feedback and are masters when it comes to conflict resolution. And they might find that individuals and teams seek them out to help them with conflicts maybe that they're experiencing. Self-actualizing Scrum Masters make decisions based on higher principles and the impact that those decisions have on the system and those within the system. A mantra at this stage might be, many problems are caused by the way in which, with an issue in the way in which the system was designed.
Excellent. And the construct-aware Scrum Master might say to themselves that people say that no one facilitates Scrum events the way that I do. I have an exquisite awareness of what is happening now, simultaneously attending to multiple practical, ethical, and ecological, immediate, and long-term considerations, as well as to emotional, rational, and spiritual concerns. My intuition guides me and ensures that no two meetings are ever facilitated in the same way. Continuous improvement is critical, but self-discovery is divine.
And so you'll notice at the construct-aware stage, it's all about awareness and intuition. Scrum Masters at this stage thrive in complexity, spend a lot of time on inner work, a lot of energy on inner work, understand the constructed nature of everything, and may be difficult to understand because of how they see the world. A mantra at this stage might be, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And so that's this one developmental line around the Scrum events. And so there are other developmental lines in your handout that we'll be looking at based on how Scrum Masters view, you can see their stages of maturity and the different accountabilities that they have. So you're going to have time to work with those in a minute, but we have one more thing that we need to talk about first, and that is developmental moves. Oh, yeah, and these are all of them. You have all that.
Okay, so when you are doing the activity in a moment and sort of orienting yourself as to where you might be and where you might want to go next, here are a few different developmental moves you might consider. And so the first one is this idea of integration, where oftentimes we might go past a stage really quickly, or perhaps when we get to a new stage, we think it's like the best thing since sliced bread, and we reject everything that brought us to where we are, and we forget about all of those good skills. And as Brock said, it's not later is better, it's what's most appropriate for your context. And so if integration is something where you're like, hey, there's actually something earlier that might help me, a key question you can ask yourself is, what from an earlier stage have I rejected or glossed over that might be useful to me today, okay? And so consolidation, this is where we're really landed in a new stage. We feel at home in this particular stage. Maybe we found that, hey, this is our station in life. We don't need to continue to grow because what we have is actually perfect for our environment and what we're looking for in terms of our own development. And so if that's you, a question that you can ask yourself is, how can I fully embody what my current stage has to offer? Right? Because there's a sort of a constellation of skills and abilities and different ways we can leverage what we've already got. Maybe you are your best self at work with a certain team, but then when you go home and you get at the dinner table with your annoying little brother and whatever, maybe you act a little differently, right? So how can part of consolidation might be, how can I bring this higher level or thinking or whatever to other areas of my life, okay? And then the next one is transition. So this is where we find ourselves a little bit between stages. So maybe we've left our current stage. Maybe we're starting to experience the downsides or the maximum of what our current stage has to offer. I think we saw one of the Scrum Masters in our example when they said, I'm really grossed out by these goals. I'm not motivated by them anymore. This is an example of somebody who's probably in transition. They've probably realized the limitations of what their current stage has to offer, and they're ready to sort of explore the next one. This can be a really disconcerting, a really stressful, a very just strange place for us to be in our lives. And so if that's you, then you might ask the question, what might help me continuing to develop in the next stage? And a great way to do that, by the way, is to just take the definitions of that stage, so all the feedback, all the different ones that you have from the different development lines, and just print them out, put them on your desk somewhere. And that can be a great sort of homework item that helps remind you of sort of that higher level of thinking or being.
Okay. So this is the time where you're going to take what you've learned today about vertical development, adult maturity, Scrum Masters, and yourselves, and you're going to apply it to your context. And so this is an activity that we do because reflecting on where you are orients you to what you might want to focus on next, and it is in and of itself a developmental activity. And so we're going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes to choose one of the developmental lines, so one of the accountabilities on the pages, and one maybe you're interested in exploring further, and you're going to choose that, and then you're going to reflect on the different stage descriptions in that developmental line, and you're going to ask yourself questions like, where do I see myself here? Where do I not see myself? Where do I want to grow into next? Keeping in mind that stages can't be skipped. And then identify one thing that you want to try based on what you're learning today. Okay, so we're going to give you about 4 or 5 minutes to do that, and then we're just going to do a debrief with the group, and then we'll wrap up from there. I saw some people checking watches, so.
Yeah, I think we try to just still end on time.
Yep. We'll just hear from a couple of people and then wrap up. We're just going to hear from a couple of people. So if you want to run that around, that'd be great. Yep. Great. Thank you. Yeah. Patience, what is that? So we'll maybe give you another 30 or 60 seconds or so just to see if there's something you can identify that you want to be trying out. Yeah. Okay, so I realize that's not a ton of time, and we wanted to make sure we gave you the learning and the handout so you can continue this outside of our session. But I was curious just to hear from a couple of people, what have you identified that you want to try as you go forward from the session and from the conference? Okay, we got one. We're just going to get a mic for you so that the people online can hear.
Yeah, I want just to be more aware and stop falling back from self-questioning, which happens. Yeah, I know. You know, when you're busy, when stress falls in, when things are not working as expected, I tend to go back to the skill-centric or even self-centric, I would say. Yeah. Things don't work out. People are stupid. Just do it the way I told you. I have that experience, and this is the biggest danger. That when things don't turn out, when being self-questioning and self-actualizing and construct-aware. Sorry for this, but sometimes it's just a pain in the ass.
That's great.
And you just fall back to, guys, just do it.
Yep.
And that's a very self-actualizing move, actually, to see our blind spots in a way that are so funny that we actually love to almost talk about them and tell people about them so much. And so I really appreciate that quality in you, and thanks for sharing.
And maybe one more? Oh, we got one over there. Yeah, if you could wait for the mic.
Yeah, I really like the idea of an impediment roadmap. I have an agile team within a non-agile organization, which can be very frustrating at times. Our impediments are usually very systemic and they can feel very overwhelming. So I like the idea of creating a roadmap and breaking it down into smaller chunks to hopefully actually change some things.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, and so, we're at time here, and so we'll just wrap up. Just want to highlight a bit about what you've kind of just been exploring here today. It's all based on vertical development, and there's a tool called the MAP Maturity Assessment Profile. And this is one of the most tailored and finely tuned profile available today. And we believe it's one of the most powerful mirrors that you can hold up to yourself, just to understand where you are. And so if you're serious about your developmental journey, we recommend it. Erkan and I are both certified leadership maturity coaches. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out, talk to us at the conference, jump on the QR code there. And we'd be happy to talk to you about what that might look like and how we can support you in your developmental journey. And with that, thank you so much for attending our talk today. We've really appreciated it, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. And we'll stick around for a couple of minutes if there's questions or anything you want to chat about on your way out.